Thank you, and thank you for the honor. My attempt is to interrogate the present of the AI economy, the artificial intelligence economy, for a possible humanity of our future. So the humanity of our future, the seminar, Technology of Future and Future of Humanity. So I'll focus on digitalization as a phenomenon in the international political economy of development, and I'd probably take less than 15 minutes. To start with, a complex institutional arrangement of fragmented rules and practices draws attention away from the foundational anomalies in the digital economy. And what are these? The denial in the governance discourse that the internet is a public good, the denial that access to the internet is a right, the normalization of data as a commodity and hence data value as private by default, the abuse of existing and pre-digital global regimes in intellectual property, patents and trade secrets, for instance, to lock away precious data resources from the public. The idea that consent can be reduced to an individualized contract. The dogma that data and AI infrastructures are most efficient only when they operate as global facilities owned by supranational private entities. Of course, the list can be longer and it goes on, but this is a narrative slippage, a naturalization of the digital discourse as one that belongs to Silicon Valley's ingenuity. The value character of data and AI commodity becomes independent then of and autonomous from producers. Who are these producers? Workers who make the AI possible, people and places that contribute the data that makes the AI. The casualties of this totalizing and essentialist digital economic model for those who are most marginalized from the global south are manifold. And I'd like to make 4 submissions in this regard. First is the sheer human indignity baked into its ideology. The brazen denial by the protagonists of this model of the rights of the next generations in the global south, rights that include claims over past gains, the claim to disposable time in the present, and claim to a future of freedom. All talk in policy spaces about digital literacy, like Viksit Bharat, and upskilling ring very hollow, because what majority young people in the South need and don't get is well-rounded education that can provide a means to live a life of freedom and dignity. The reality of work in the global algorithmic order is well documented now. We know platforms extract value in the global south where laws are lax and guarantees minimal through a never-before labor squeeze, constant surveillance of workers, penalization for behavior deemed deviant, and brazen dismissal of the wage-labor relationships. Platforms re-socialize the labor contract as fragmented units based on tasks, multiple gigs per worker, managed through expanding networked geographies that include work and life, but constantly preventing workers from being able to define their collective experience of work as a shared material reality. In our ethnographies in Bengaluru, we have seen the uphill task for workers to build solidarity and community. Paradoxically, though, the geographic clusters where migrants live are important sources for platforms like Urban Company, who use these geographies of precarity to recruit and onboard labor, scouting for very specific social profiles. Supervisory teams are routinely sent to low-income areas to onboard women from oppressed castes for stigmatized jobs. Platforms thus ascetize and appropriate embedded community in various ways, but deny workers the basic right to build community. The global division of labor in algorithmified workplaces follows old markers, only its indignity is much more intense. Secondly, the fundamental issue of the economy today is also that it's driven less by a logic of innovation and production and more by the forces of distribution. All market forces are directed towards ubiquitous consumption and fast disruption, finding new markets and being the first to realize value. first mover. The innovations we celebrate are mostly rooted in non-productive distributed forces sought to be perfected by first mover monopolies and not linked to real value generation. First movers like Alibaba and Amazon have been able to build logistics chains in large parts of the world with a market dangerously and poisonously tilted towards an endless consumption cycle vying for eyeballs on loop. The revolution in distribution and consumption has also seen data-enabled market segmentation used by tech businesses to mop up household surplus. EdTech companies, Byju's, come with infinite product offerings geared towards low-income households. Fintech offers bountiful products in a largely unregulated market, exploiting those desperate for credit as little as 500 to 800 rupees. And all of this for data about the household. Now to my third point. The liberal conception of digital freedoms has created a host of challenges in how we conceive of the AI paradigm. A narrow reading of rights as liberal freedoms to consent, to privacy and more, fails to democratize the purpose and value of AI. There are no public rights in the AI economy, despite the hundreds of human rights guidelines issued by UN and other organizations. What we have at best, and that too for the privileged few, are consumer or user rights. The infrastructural publics in the AI value chains, the political communities that must be vested with rights, subnational jurisdictions and communities of fate, panchayats, municipalities, libraries, small farmers, peasants, street vendors in the global south are disenfranchised and lack the legitimacy to have a say. The OECD is just about waking up to this debate and is issuing a notification and guidelines for its business and human rights protocols for AI value chains. But this is unlikely to be within the narrow frameworks of liability that do not reflect duties and commitments of corporations and nation states. Many governments in the South are already part of bilateral trade deals through which they have written off their right to scrutinize algorithms of transnational companies. This means that even courts will not be able to intervene in instances of algorithmic injustice. Fourthly and finally, the takeover by big tech of innovation and of socioeconomic infrastructures signifies a loss of the publicness necessary for economic democracy and innovation. Activists and independent civil society actors in the South are confronted with the tall order of working our way through short-sighted opportunism and the lack of vision and courage of our own governments in global arenas. And so, how do we address the global political economy of the digital amidst the criminal capture of public and policy space by big tech? This is our question. How do we denaturalize the current neoliberal consensus on data and AI? What are the regimes of public reason we seek nationally? And what do we see as appropriate in the global regimes that can further collective freedoms in relation to the digital economy? So I come to the second part of my presentation on where do we go from here. Science fiction was mentioned, so I will mention Lord of the Rings. It turns out that Silicon Valley billionaires have also been very impressed with the book. So for example, Palente, as in Palente Technologies, which is the largest surveillance company co-founded by billionaire investor and Trump supporter Peter Thiel, the word Palantir is based on one of the artifacts that comes in this science fiction novel. And in Lord of the Rings, the word Palantir refers to an indestructible crystal ball with the ability to see faraway events as well as peer into the past. And Thiel's Palantir specializes in selling intelligence, what he calls actionable intelligence, which is a euphemism for violence on peoples and nations. And it's generated by analyzing data obtained from the company's unmanned aerial vehicles, which are fitted over hostile terrain. Palantir's system has been used in the Israel Defense Force in killing Hamas fighters in Gaza, predictive policing in Norway, so much for the EU's call to human rights, and the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement in rounding up illegal immigrants, adults and children alike. Such is the power of big tech, infrastructural power, power to define materiality to grasp the future. If this future, a future by technology, is the sum total of existence, we are certainly in a present state of emergency. Yet, what we know is that the intelligence infrastructures of today are not immutable. The techno-economic paradigm and its injustices can be addressed through thoughtful and bold actions that delegitimize the dominant AI model. This is about democratic control, the capabilities not only for freedom of knowledge, but the very freedom of consciousness, some of the issues that were raised about sensibility. I was introduced to the idea of freedom of consciousness through my reading of Paulo Freire, Brazilian philosopher and pedagogue. The crystal ball of AI can see, it may even claim to know, but understanding is always human. It's a result of the truth conditions we create through conscious knowing, critical knowing, the relationship we establish through institutional norms and processes between human dignity on the one side and tools of reason on the other, that thinkers like Gauri Lankesh martyred herself for. Today is her day of martyrdom. Here is where we go to the past. The history of digital architectures, the emancipatory models that came up 35 years ago, those that we have been forced to forget in the software, data, network, and information commons. And I would like to offer 3 tentative thoughts on how do we move from the rather tenuous present. How do we reinvent our politics? I'll end in a minute or two. Okay. First is the reassertion of the idea of the people into political discourse. The idea of people and popular sovereignty was born between the great 18th century revolutions and the mid-20th century movements for decolonization. And I talk about this because we're all reduced to users of technology. The simple truism is that democratic legitimacy requires authorization from the people. Modern institutions built on the constitutional theory of public authority are rooted in the doctrine of popular sovereignty. The limited government of the constitutional order was theoretically possible because of the unlimited power ascribed to the people. What has really happened today is the march of digital capitalism, and here is the decoupling of ideas of sovereignty from public reason. We are all reduced to users and data subjects, and we all want to sign up for our privacy. As individuals, we struggle against the right and might of these corporations as equal contenders to processes of justice. These corporations are people in courts, but we must resist this abominable equivalence. We, the people, in an assertion of the claims of those in the margins, of the voice of dissent, of the corporeality of oppression, the collective claim to the future and the future of institutions. Secondly, we need to revitalize our politics of recognition to make the assertion of popular sovereignty genuinely transformative. We do not want to be segmented by Instagram as queer, right? The spectacle of gender politics is everywhere today, but as feminist people, we must defy the delusional logic of individuation we see in big AI that dominates us. We are more than the aggregations and dissections of algorithmic existence. We may be queer, migrants, oppressed castes, tribals, and the indigenous, and any and all of our intersections must defy adaptations as algorithmic personas. So we must rebuild our politics of misrecognition to a place of dignity and belonging to those who are denied these. And finally, and thirdly, we need to build, use, and propagate very specific artifacts that stand for a new economy of commoning. We need to do this not just as resistance politics, but as a societal praxis. The urgency to reclaim society and the planet from the criminal capture of surveillance capitalism cannot be overemphasized. In the ivory towers where policies are discussed today, there is brazen delegitimization of everything public. Public finance, public universities, public parks, of the entire role of the knowledge commons, of public technology. And so, all of this comes with a huge cost. The digital commons movements are aligned with the ethos of a transformative world that can be profoundly feminist. It can nurture a digitality of care rather than of extractivism. These lenses, both of the commons and of feminism, provide us the means to tackle the acute maldistribution wrought by the emergency. We can think of platform cooperatives. We can think of how public digital infrastructures can support small businesses. We don't need big data and big AI for everything. A small farmers cooperative can decide to go with a small AI model, but that will need some kind of support from the government for foundational AI modeling in Indian languages. So, to conclude, the humanity of our future hinges on the discovery and practice of a political economic paradigm based on the digital commons scaffolded by the public. A paradigm in which critical human consciousness, complemented by machine intelligence, can forge a new sensibility of dignity, care ethics of society and economy. These parts are not ready-made, but I want to quote Manuel Castells, who gave us the right to start all over again. So Castells talks about the right to start all over again, to begin the beginning after reaching the threshold of self-destruction by our current institutions, so that we can relearn how to live together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.